slime season.
Yeah.
On America's ooeyest and gooeyest podcast, The Pod People. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, smoking on that evil, no Knievel, bitch.
I'm the red blob of communism, Ben Sheets.
Hi, I'm a gooped-up white boy, Cleveland Mosier.
With a little bit of swag.
A little bit of swag, a little bit of slime.
Busting it down Blob style.
Blobbing it down sexual style. There we go. Blobbing it down silicone style. There we go. We had to workshop it, but we got there.
Is he goated with the slime?
Oh, so goated. He's so gooped.
Well, we're back and in much better spirits tonight, I think.
Absolutely.
Because we're continuing with part 2 of our 6-year Podiversary original versus remake special. Last week we talked about the 1958 version of the Blob, which was a huge disappointment to all of us. 1950 late. Now we've jumped to present day, to the year 1988. 30 years,
here we are.
30 years ahead, here we are. And we're talking about the remake of The Blob, directed by Chuck Grassley. No, that's not right.
Dairy Queen's pretty good for you-know-what.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Chuck Russell.
Chuck Russell, yes, thank you, Jesus Christ.
Russell.
I don't know what the fuck was going on there.
The Chuckler, the Rustler, he's coming.
Well, yeah, so this is directed by Chuck Russell.
I will say, this movie features a lot of rustling Chuck. Because it looks kind of like meat. It's like rustling around.
All right, I'll allow it. This is not our first time talking about a film directed by Chuck Russell. He also did Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors.
Oh, and it shows.
Yeah. One of the wildest careers. I mentioned it right before we recorded, but he has like 4 major movies, right? It's Dream Warriors, The Blob, The Mask, featuring Jim Carrey, and The Scorpion King. I guess 5. He has Eraser, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So...
And then he kind of fell off low-key after that.
The Scorpion King.
After the Scorpion King.
Hey, easy.
Hey, I mean...
Not a good movie.
Hold up.
It's not.
I haven't seen it since I was a child, but man, I used to watch that movie on repeat.
Yeah.
I loved the Scorpion King as a kid, man.
I think you're just riding the high off of watching The Mummy recently. I think you're maybe misremembering how good the Scorpion King actually is.
I just said I smelled what The Rock was cooking.
But you know what? It doesn't even matter. I am more than willing to forgive Chuck Russell of the Scorpion King because he did Dream Warriors, the second best, I think, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Second or third.
Debatable, yeah.
I haven't seen the ones that compete, so for me, it's the best.
It's my second favorite after the original, but because of that and because of this, which I think is his true magnum opus, The Blob, which he actually, I somehow always forget this, but it makes so much sense. He co-wrote this with Frank Darabont. Who is the
legendary writer and director.
Legendary writer-director who I think has, no question, the highest number of good Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah. Famously directed and, adapted Shawshank Redemption,
The Green Mile, and The Mist, which is probably my personal favorite. And also did the first season of The Walking Dead back when that show was good. So yeah, you've got the dream team of Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell writing this thing, Chuck Russell directing, and man, just compared to the 50s one, night and fucking day, man.
Well, what I love so much about it is, like, especially in the first half, they take a lot of plot points and elements directly from the original.
I would say from beginning to end.
Recontextualize them. In interesting ways.
And subvert some of them in fun, cool ways, which we'll get into. I'd say, like, just blanket statement, pretty much all of our problems with the 50s one are solved in this one.
Easily. No, I wouldn't even say pretty much. I would say every single one is addressed beautifully.
The crazy thing is that it's about the same length as
but
as the original,
it feels
but
like
it's
3 times shorter.
Yeah, well, and so much more happens in it. It's just like it's paced so well. Like it doesn't start off like too fast, but like once it gets going, like it fucking clips along.
Yeah, it eases you right in.
Well, and we complained in the original about not much happening. And on the other side, with this...
a feast.
There's so much happens.
It's a feast of riches, and I will say, like, honestly, it's easy to say, like, The Fly or The Thing is the best example of practical effects of all time. I think it's this movie due solely to the breadth and variety of effects.
Oh, the breadth.
Yeah,
it's so expansive.
Yeah.
Like, throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
I think this movie is easily on par with The Thing in terms of like practical effects and like monster showcase. You know? Yeah, I mean, I mean, The Thing is full of them too. But it's just as much, I think, if not more.
There's a certain precision to The Thing. Like each sequence in it is so distinct and unique to itself. Largely, whereas the Blob, it's always we're featuring the Blob, we're going hard with the Blob, and we're doing a lot of unique things with it and the texture of it. But in The Thing, like the sequence with the dogs is so different from the sequence where the head gets up and starts crawling around, and like they're all like very unique. And here they are as well. Like they get a lot of mileage out of the Blob.
That's what's great about this movie
the
is
pink
that
weird goo
is it like
stuff.
for a monster that is just like a big blob that like engulfs people and dissolves them. You get so many like incredibly fun creative kills out of this movie, and like they're all handled so well effects wise. I think I was reading something like 50% of the film's budget was effects.
That doesn't surprise me. I'm surprised it's not more even.
And so well utilized. Well, I mean, watching the credits, like how over half the credits was
just a
various effects department.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's just like a paragraph of carpenters.
Yeah,
for instance.
Yeah, well,
so much respect.
You know, I do agree that there's a precision to like the Thing's effects, but like a lot of the Thing is based on the tension of not knowing when it's going to appear, or who's been turned and he's still human. Whereas this movie, it's the Blob, and we get
it's the Blob
throughout the movie. Like, I don't think there's any 5-minute chunk outside of maybe the intro to this movie where we don't see the Blob. It is constantly featured.
There's the run of the what are they called? Like the hazmat team. I think that sequence.
The government spooks.
Yeah,
I mean, it's still intercut. It's still intercut with the movie theater sequence and things like that.
Well, it's all action, like regardless. Like like when they're chasing after him through the woods, and the exposition even is like pretty rich with them like pulling up the satellite meteor and all that stuff. Like it's got great pacing across the board for sure.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
All I'm really trying to say is like if Blob things aren't happening.
It's not like it's boring. It's not boring. Yeah. Totally unlike the 50s one where we were all just like bored out of our fucking gourds for the entire goddamn movie.
Literally fell asleep.
This is like there's no time to be bored. There's so much happening. It's really excellent. And the Blob does all of the things that the song in the 50s one promised.
In like the first
it leaps.
20 minutes.
It creeps. It glides, it slides across the floor and through the door and all around the walls and the ceiling.
Yeah, that was
it does some extra stuff. Yeah, it does extra stuff. So
I think it's good. We can all celebrate. Happy Feliz Navi Blob to all of you.
Yeah, why not? You know what? Yeah. Feliz Navi Blob, Cleve.
Feliz Navi Blob.
Well, let's start at the beginning. So this film takes a lot of plot elements from the original. You have your football star jock character who, asks the cheerleader out on a date.
Well, and I'd love to get into some specifics on that too, because like I think that sequence is lovely. It's not just that he muscles up the courage to ask her on a date. He's sitting on the sidelines after like an incredible football play. The game is still going on in front of him, and his buddy tells him, like, yo, you gotta ask her out, man. Like, you gotta do it. And he's like, I think I'm gonna do it. And he's like, no, you're not. And he's like, I will. But I gotta wait for the right moment. It's all about timing. I love that dialogue. It's really sweet. We also see the majority of the cast just in the stands.
Yep.
Shouting. Which I like that setup, too. It's a small town. Everybody's there. Everyone's celebrating the football game.
This movie does a great job of setup and payoff all throughout.
It is supreme. It's my favorite. Every little detail gets some sort of payoff.
And
organically too. It always comes up at just the right time for the fun.
You mentioned waiting for the right moment. Like, the moment happens, he gets tackled and knocked to the ground.
Yeah, he gets
back into the game.
He gets tackled like by like 4 or 5 dudes, like through like the refreshment
breaking the table in half.
Yeah, and he's just like covered in just like this pile, a blob even, of dudes, and they all sort of like peel themselves off him, and he's like laying there dazed, but he has the football, he didn't drop it, so he got the first down or whatever. And then like Meg, the cheerleader, is standing over him, and he just looks up at her. He's like, "Hey Meg, what are you doing tonight?"
Timing.
Perfect timing. We should mention too that Meg is played by Shawnee Smith, who people might recognize from the Saw movies. She plays Amanda. We'll be seeing her in just next week even.
Yeah.
When Saw 10 comes out. Oh boy. I think she's really good in this. This wasn't like her first role, but it is an early one. Unlike the 50s one, the kids are like believable kids
and
in this.
Charming.
I think
characters.
I think Shawnee Smith was like 19 or 20 when they filmed this. So, young enough to be believably like a high school student,
but still competent at acting.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
Thankfully.
Yeah. And we also set up the sort of like loner bad boy character played by Kevin Dillon. The motorcycle riding, leather jacket, mullet badass. I love the way they introduce him because he's like out at like this gulch, and he's like
another great setup.
Trying to that then gets great payoff later, but yeah, he's trying to jump like this old broken bridge on his motorcycle, and as he's gearing up, as he gets close, like his motorcycle starts like making noises, so like he bails right as he gets to the edge of the bridge and sort of like falls off, and the homeless guy is there like watching him, and he gives him a little applause,
pours a little out,
pours one out for him a little bit. Just like all this great setup to all of these characters. We got to talk about when Paul, the football star, is with his buddy, and they go to the pharmacy because his buddy's also got a date that night, and he's going to get condoms. And as he's like asking the pharmacist for them, he's like talking, the Reverend walks up and is talking to him, and the pharmacist comes up and is like, regular or ribbed? And he like looks at the Reverend. He's like, it's not even for me. It's for my buddy over there. He's too nervous to do it, but he's taking a girl out tonight, and I told him he's got to use protection. So he asked me to buy these for him. It's not for me, I swear. And then the payoff for that is the pharmacist is Meg's dad.
It's perfect. The reveal is amazing. What is it like? Because she comes into the living room after introducing several other characters. Like her little brother and her mom, and she just says, "Hey, Dad," and there's someone reading the newspaper, and the newspaper comes down, and it's his face, and he sees the boyfriend is there. Oh, revelations. It's so funny.
So funny.
It's just perfectly, it's just, chef's kiss. And again, too, like, we're sitting down to watch this movie that, like, I've always heard is an amazing effects spectacle, and we're running through some of these characters that were sort of introduced just the other day for us, and I didn't mind at all. Like, I never minded any of the setups for this film or the character introductions, because they're just so well like written and charming, and they're not overly deep or complex or convoluted. Well, and it's just everything it needs to be.
The crazy thing is there's so much more like actual setup in this movie than in the 50s one, because the 50s one starts with like Steve McQueen and the girlfriend like on the date. They're already out, and they like the first thing that happens is they see like the meteor fall. So like it starts with the quote unquote action so much faster, but there's just so much of nothing happening, whereas this movie takes all of this time to set up all of these different characters with these great little gags and bits and getting to know all of them and everybody who's in the town who are going to be seeing killed horribly throughout the rest of the movie. And it's just like so much more lively.
But it's really tightly paced and edited too. Like even the way sequences are cross-cut is really sharply done. For example, Brian, kind of the bad boy motorcycle leather jacket character, he's introduced by he is trying to do this big jump, you know, that we mentioned earlier, and you know, as he's going, it's cross-cut with the football game and the cheering of the crowd, and it almost
everyone's chanting "Go, go, go, go."
It almost feels like they're cheering for him, and that's very intentionally cut that way. On the in addition to that, like after the football game gets out, we cut over to the diner and introduce the sheriff and the waitress that worked there. And so as the crowd comes in, they have to kind of split their conversation.
But even before that, there's a wonderful bit of dialogue that reflects the Blob coming in, where she says to the sheriff, because the sheriff's like, "Oh, it's pretty dead in here right now because of the football game," and she says, "Well, once they're all done screaming out there, they're going to come rushing in." And I love that. It relates to the Blob so much. But
yeah, no, what I was just emphasizing is like the transitions between scenes and the way they introduce characters between these scenes is very fluid and feels just so smartly crafted.
Well, to jump back even farther to like the very, very beginning of the film, I love the way that they set it up over the opening credits, because like starts with like a wide shot of the town in the mountains. It's set in Colorado, and like we start going into the town and just getting like all of these shots, and it's just like dead. It's like a ghost town. There's like nobody around, and you're kind of wondering, it's like, oh, are we seeing like the aftermath after like what like are we gonna see, you know, why nobody's around, why the town is dead,
like,
and then we're just like
synths too,
and then we finally work our way through town and get over to the football field, and we see that the town is dead because everyone's at the high school football game. Just like again a masterclass of just like good, clean, clever editing. So refreshing to see that in a movie, isn't it?
It really is. And what I love about it, too, is for as rich as this film is, and for as perfectly well-written as it is, and as just bombastic as the sequences are, especially over the original film, how much this movie is still kind of a love letter to the original film. Like, so many of the beats are all still there. There's still plenty of, like, I mean, far more respect than we paid it.
Sure.
On the last episode. Like, there's still, like, plenty of love and care. And they were able to, like, sift through the original film and look through all of the moments, all of the beats, and keep everything that had value. It's fucking surgical. One of my favorite
just goes to show that you can tell almost the exact same story and it can be good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is they kind of rug pull you with that in this one. Because
in certain ways,
take a lot of expectations from the original and, you know, subvert them in big ways. And I don't want to jump into that just yet.
Well,
but
I think it's about, we can start getting into like the first big one, you know, like the events are basically the same as the first one. You know, we see the hobo out in his shack with his dog, and he's crushing cans that he's collected.
So cute. No, and his shack has like really nice texture. Like it's just covered in
hung with hubcaps. Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah. And he's just wearing a cast iron skillet on his foot to smash
the cans.
There's so much texture. And, dude, we see him before also, because when the cool guy, what's his name?
Brian.
When Brian
Flag
wrecks his motorcycle and he's kind of lying in the ditch. He looks up and he sees the homeless guy there, so they have a moment.
Because he's there collecting cans, and he pours a little beer out of the one that he's holding before he puts it into his bag.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's like, pour one out. It's like, oh, man, you beefed your stunt. Sorry, man.
Yeah, I like that kind of, like, charming moment they have between each other before we cut back to the hobo later.
Yeah, so, the hobo's doing his thing. Same deal as the 50s one. He sees a meteorite fall out of the sky. He goes to where it has crashed, and he sees, something in it and starts poking at it with a stick. Gets, this little goopy blob on the stick, and it leaps onto his hand and latches on. And, we cut to Paul and Meg driving out in the country, going on their date, whatever. And, the old man, the bum, runs into the road, and they, hit him with the car. Very similar to the 50s one, except this one has the addition of Brian being there because he ran into the hobo first, because he's out there fixing his motorcycle from busting it earlier.
I love the scene when Brian runs into the homeless guy in the forest, because the homeless guy appears in front of Brian, and he has it like a machete.
He has a hatchet.
Yeah, a hatchet. Yeah, he has a hatchet in his hand, and just starts chopping his hand, trying to chop his hand off.
Yeah.
Obviously, the blob covers that, so he fails.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like he cuts into it, and the blob, like, works its way farther up his arm and, like, covers the wound.
And you kind of get the sense that, like, it goes further up its arm after he cuts into it because it's thirsty.
Yeah.
It like slurps up over it. It's cool. I love it too because even Brian going back to his motorcycle has a great deal of weight because he has to go back into town first, and he goes by the mechanic shop. And in the mechanic shop, they set up the snowmobile super early on, and I love that because like it's clear it's a wonderful touch for people who have seen the first film like us. Who recognize, like, oh, yeah, we know that cold.
The cold is its weakness.
So setting up, like, a big snow truck, amazing.
Well, it's not just a snow truck. Like, this is kind of a ski town, and for the last couple seasons, they've gotten a light snowfall. So it's, like, they mention it as an avalanche shooter on a sign at the beginning of the movie. So it's to cover
the slopes with manufactured snow. Well, yeah, because they mention, and not just in this scene, but other characters multiple times throughout the movie mention that this is like an unseasonably warm October. That, like, it should be cold at this point. They should be getting snow soon, but it's been too warm, which again is nice. Like, okay, the snow isn't going to come save them because the blob is weak to cold, right? But anyway, yeah, so they, jumping back ahead, they hit the homeless guy, and they put him in the car, and they take him to the hospital. They kind of just, like, put him off in a room somewhere. They're like, does he have any kind of health insurance or anything? It's like, well, you're going to have to,
real dystopian shit.
It's like, you're going to have to fill out, you're going to have to fill out all this paperwork, and it's like the doctor's with another patient right now. It's like they just, like, do not give a shit.
The doctor, who turns out to be played by Jack Nance.
Jack Nance in just like a very tiny little role. He's in like
cameo.
Yeah, he basically does nothing. He runs into the room and then he runs out of the room. Nice to see him nonetheless, though. But yeah, as Paul's sitting there filling out all the paperwork, and he's like, he's kind of flirting with Meg and like, oh, I bet this is probably the worst first date you've ever been on, blah, blah, blah. Like, do you want me to get you a soda? She's like, yeah. So he gets up and goes to the vending machine, and he sees sort of like down at the end of the hall, he can see into the hobo's room, and he's covered with a blanket, and he sees something moving underneath the blanket.
Direct just reference to the 50s
from
one.
The 50s one.
But it looks much less like the hobos.
Is jerking off, yeah. Well, and it has a much more shocking payoff as well. Yeah. Because he goes into the room, and first he like, the hobo's head sort of rolls towards him, and his eyes are all white, and there's like something moving like in his neck and his mouth. And so Paul like runs out and goes and gets the doctor, and they run back in and pull the blanket down, and the hobo is just like gone from like the chest down, like totally dissolved.
Yeah, it does look like he's been like melted.
Yeah,
below, and it always does. It's that same goopy flesh with all the little tendrils that you would get in something like The Thing as well. That is just peak
the blob is much fleshier in this one. I was reading that they were saying they wanted it to look like an inside out stomach.
It does,
and
it has that organ quality.
Yeah, we were joking.
It's fleshy and veiny.
Yeah, we were joking about how the original kind of looks tasty. This one does not.
This one does not look tasty. No, not at all. I would not eat this blob, except maybe once it gets frozen at the end. Then it looks kind of tasty. Yeah.
But the big aspect of the scene is, Paul runs off to the other room, and the blob is hiding behind the door.
Yeah, he's trying to call the police.
Master of stealth in this movie.
It's crawling along the walls.
Yeah.
Just
and
like
then
the song says, and then the ceiling.
I love that scene, though, because it's emphasized how corrosive the blob is in this version. Because we get the classic alien-esque shot where, it's dripping acid onto the desk.
Yeah, he sees it dripping and like sizzling, and then he looks up, and it's too late, and it leaps off the ceiling onto him.
What I like is we see it leap, and we hear him scream, and we cut to the cheerleader. So we don't know at that point if he's actually gone, because movies fake that sort of thing all the time, and plus he's largely set up as the protagonist of the film.
I mean, he's playing the Steve McQueen role.
Yeah,
right?
like he's gonna live, and so this is subversion number one, basically, Ben. And like you were saying, and then she runs down the hall, and we get that iconic shot of him just absolutely covered in the ooze, just being melted from the inside of this creature as he stretches his hand out towards her. It looks horrifying.
It's a horrifying effect. I saw this movie at a very impressionable age when I was probably like 12 or 13. I saw it on TV at a friend's house. It was on like Sci-Fi Channel or something. Is this movie and Abominable are like the which is weird, I know. Shout out to Abominable, but it's like those are two movies that I saw like on Sci-Fi Channel at a young age that have like left a big impression on me, and like this scene in particular, I still find it like one of the most like upsetting on-screen film deaths in like any horror movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I think it has all the more impact because the character is set up to be the protagonist, so it completely blindsides the audience. And I love that. I think that's something that horror films don't do enough of. We rarely see someone set up as a protagonist dying early. I think the last big one that we covered on the podcast was probably like The Hunt, where they switch off between protagonists a lot.
Oh yeah, there's probably been one or two since then, but I'm blanking.
It's more rare than it should be.
It certainly is. Yeah, it's a great subversion.
I think Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell, in writing this, take it a step further, because it's not only Paul as our tentative protagonist that gets killed off, but he sets up other characters that are fully well-rounded and developed that are later, killed off.
Other characters that in the 50s one are much more like central, like hero characters who, get killed off in unexpected times, and it really does a great job of like making you feel like no characters are safe.
And it turns out when you give flavor and texture and character to these minor players, suddenly their deaths have way more impact.
Yeah.
So,
and it's all done naturally. It's all done in service of the plot and to elevate the movie, and also done entertainingly. Far more so than I would say like another film that tries to do that a lot, like let's say Halloween Kills, where they'll feature the characters talking to each other for 10 minutes, before Michael Myers comes and kills them off. But that's not the same.
Yeah.
It's all done in service of like the overarching narrative, as opposed to just like just for the sake of doing that. Like, I think just setting up characters to kill them off is not enough on its own. Like, you really need to have the whole gamut.
I think it can be, depending on the movie. Like, some movies, like, you really do just need bodies, you know?
Yeah.
But for a movie like this that has such a high body count, pretty much everybody that you see die has had some sort of, like, genuine character, like, development or setup earlier in the movie.
Even with the hazmat guys, like, they get a line in.
Yeah,
or two.
it's
they try and give them something.
It doesn't feel like anybody in this movie is just bodies, really. Even, like, the more minor characters, or at least, like, having an idea of who they are as characters makes their deaths feel more impactful and meaningful. And when coupled with just, like, the absolutely insanely good and grotesque effects,
it's a perfect film.
It's a lot of these deaths feel like a gut punch. Like, Paul's death feels like a gut punch. It's horrible. And it is, like, the effect is just, like, easily up there alongside the dog kennel scene in The Thing, or, you know, anything like that. Or, you know, fucking Jeff Goldblum, like, vomiting on the dude's leg in The Fly. Like, it's right there.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, as Meg is, like, taking his hand and trying to, like, pull him out of the blob, like, as he's being melted, and, like, his face is, like, collapsing in on itself, and, like, his jaw is distending further and further as he screams, and the arm, like, comes flying off.
And the flesh at the base of the like, the flesh on the forearm is just so vibrant and red. You
can see, like, the tendons and, like, the muscles stretching as, like, the arm comes loose from the rest of him.
And it's so colorful, and the scene is largely lit blue. Most of the film is just that classic 80s blue lights and fog, man, that I just love. And it's always like juxtaposed with the red flesh.
Yeah, well, much like the original, this is all set over the course of one night.
Yep.
And
it's so much nicer to look at. So much nicer to look at.
It's way more dynamic.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, you can actually see things at night. You know, again, they've got, you know, it's very sourcey lighting, you know, as was common in the 80s, but I don't give a shit. I like to be able to see things. I don't care if it's obviously just a spotlight they put in those trees over there and pump some fog through. Like, it looks good. It looks good. I can see it. I can see what the fuck is going on. And, like, the blue is just, like, so nicely contrasted with, like, the pink and purple and red of the blob.
It's all blues and reds, baby. And too, like, when you get that smoke, because there's a lot of smoke machine shots, tons. I mean, most of the film has, I mean,
hell, when the government shows up, it reminds me of, like, E.T.
Yeah, we even get, like, the motorcycle, like, when he finally does make the jump going through the air with the guys chasing after. It's all very E.T., like the bicycle scene. But it's all
except he doesn't start flying.
And but the other thing to note too is because it's an 80s film and it's all shot on just primo film, it's swimmy grain. Like, it's very pretty, swimmy, luscious, vibrant grain.
Yeah, well, it's shot on film. That's what you get when you shoot on film.
Like, fuck, it looks so delicious and textured.
Not like they had any other choice in '88.
No, but man,
they could have shot on Video 8, I guess. But...
yes, yeah, but no, it's so fucking good to look at.
Yeah,
just again a fucking feast in every way. Technically,
I think it comes down to detail too. Like, with the effects, like with the arm being ripped off that we were mentioning about earlier, like, when it's on the ground, we get a shot of it just laying on the ground, like, twitching and stuff. And it's something small that, like, you know, lesser directors or writers would kind of brush over and just skip to the next scene.
Well, I mean, yeah, and those kinds of details take more work.
Yeah.
Because then that's not just a prosthetic, it's an animatronic, right?
Yeah.
Those are easy corners to cut. And certainly I don't think most directors would be wrong for cutting those corners. But when those details are there, it just, like... just adds
impact.
Yeah, it adds impact and adds flavor, and it's just those moments that make you go, yeah. Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah, even.
Fuck yeah. That's movies, baby.
In this movie, it's like, we're not just saying fuck yeah at the practicals. We're not just saying fuck yeah at, like, the visuals. We're also just saying fuck yeah at the story.
And everything.
Everything. Like, across the board. The music, too. Yes, well, I brought it up. Might as well mention it. I think this film strikes a very interesting balance between synthetic and orchestral. There's always some very clear choices of when to do which. And the first time it kind of threw me, like the hospital scene, going back to that, and then beyond, like there's so many of these sequences where people are just getting ripped apart, and we see their flesh being warped inside of this creature, and it's horrifying and galling. They're going for like very bombastic orchestral music during some of those scenes, and it's almost needed. Because, like, the opposite would be to do something more synthy and more industrial and darker. But because they're playing music that could fit in any... It's almost John Williams-esque at times. Like, they could fit in, like, a Steven Spielberg film, or... Like, the music that's playing while people are being devoured by the Blob could be played in tandem with, like, Indiana Jones, like, being chased by the Nazis, you know? Like, it's very cinematic music. For a sequence that is very much pretty heavy. I think it adds to the fantasy, and it almost makes it, to me, like, more palatable and easier to watch. Like, when the football player is getting destroyed, like, there's still, like, a whole horn line playing, you know? And there's just something about that, you know, gives it, like, an element of fantasy that, while it's still a gut punch, it's not grimdark in the same way, I guess.
To me, it feels like it raises the production value and
100%.
makes the movie feel a lot more expensive than it probably was.
Which was do
great.
that, man.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This movie, the budget for this movie was supposedly about $19 million.
Wow.
So not cheap. In 88,
for a
you know,
horror movie?
for a horror movie, and about $9 million was effects budget.
Yeah.
And again, they use it so well.
Yeah.
We got to talk about like the diner sequence.
Before we do, I think the one scene that comes between that is Paul's friend.
Oh God, yes!
I want to talk about that
there's
scene.
So
because
many.
That scene is one of the
too.
few scenes in the movie that's not directly tied to the main story, but it works for the film because it's such a great scene and effect sequence, and there's so much character flavor to Paul's sleazy friend with his souped up trunk.
I loved that. I was really taken aback by it. So, yeah, Paul's friend, who was also trying to get a girl, obviously.
He was buying the condoms for himself,
we also made a note to, shout out to, like, front seats on 80s cars.
Bench seats.
Bench seats, yeah.
Shout out to bench
need
seats.
to bring back bench seats.
Yeah, bring back bench seats. It was funny because the previous scene in the car, like, it was a different car, but also had bench seats, and we were talking about how, like, yeah, they're good for macking. Yeah. You know, they're like, and like, you can actually put your arm around someone in like in a bench seat.
It's the sloppy toppy seat.
And that, and then we cut to a scene where it's being used for that, which is very funny.
Yeah.
You really think about it's like in a modern car, like it just doesn't work.
No, man, the center console's in the way.
Yeah, fucked up.
It's so inconvenient.
I know.
It's like,
and Puritan.
I get back in the day when you had to have a place for like your CDs and your cassette tapes. Mm-hmm. But like, we can get rid of the center console now. Let's bring back bench seats. Let's bring back the sloppy toppy seats in cars. You should be able to fit 3, maybe even 4 people in the front seat of a car.
Absolutely.
I think.
And through the windshields.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when you start thinking about it, I think the real practical reason is, like, you can't really put airbags. You can't, because that space in the middle is kind of taken up by, like...
that's a whole suburban family gone. Like,
your radio and your air conditioning controls and everything, so, maybe we don't need to bring back bench seats.
Just don't put a seatbelt there. Even better. And it's just for when the car is parked, okay? Just trust people to do that.
Sure.
Like,
That's all.
Don't drive. Yeah, make it illegal to drive with 3 people. In the front seat.
Don't drive with 3 people in the front seat, but the space is good. So, anywho, cut to this guy. He's making out with his lady, and they're kissing. And he stops his. Would you care? What was the name of his drink? It was so funny. It was like
cherry cooler.
Oh yeah. Would you care for another one of my special cherry coolers?
Well, it's funny because she's kind of relenting and she doesn't want.
She's like obviously really drunk.
Yeah,
like
this dude is a bad guy.
On the verge of passing out.
Her mouth is stained red from the cherry coolers.
Yeah, he's been pumping her full of them, and that's fucked up.
Yeah, she's like, I don't want to keep doing this, and he's like, well, you see that ring?
He's like, you're wearing my ring around your neck. She's got like his high school ring like on a chain around her neck. He's like, that means you're my girl, right? She's like, yeah, I guess. He's like, well, I think you need another one of my special cherry coolers. She's like, no, I think I've had enough. He's like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm going to make you another one. So he gets up, and he goes outside, and he goes to his trunk. And it's like fucking Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like when he fucking opens up this thing, it's glorious.
It's what really is. It's like some Pimp My Ride kind of shit. Because like if there's one thing that they did every episode of that show is put like some mad out of pocket unnecessary shit in the trunk. Yeah, like they never knew what to do
like
with the
aquarium.
trunk. Bro, how many episodes of Pimp My Ride did they put like a TV screen and a PlayStation in somebody's trunk? It's like what do you do? Like what are you doing, man? You're gonna pull over to the parking lot with your friends and play PlayStation out of your trunk? Like, come on, man. But this dude has basically like the point is he basically has a full bar in his trunk.
Yeah. Yes,
and it's like got all like these party lights and everything,
and it looks functional. Like when he opens the trunk, there's an additional lid that comes up as well. Like clearly, like he's got the whole thing refrigerated and like it keeps everything cool.
My favorite detail of the stuff in the trunk is he has a box full of necklaces with glass rings on them.
He's just been handing them out all over town. This is a small town. You think the girls would get wise to that at some point? I think
that like this is only the 3rd one he's used. You know, he's just got he's just ready to do this forever.
My favorite detail is that he's got like a little tiny hand mixer too.
Yeah, like an electric mixer.
Yeah, like a little electric hand mixer. Okay. Yeah, well, he's like mixing up the drinks.
There's a little basketball hoop in it. Like,
yeah, and so like the whole time he's doing this, it's intercutting.
Also, it would never work. The drinks would just go everywhere as soon as he starts driving.
Yeah,
like that's the funny. Like there's complete. You really have to completely suspend disbelief for it, which to me makes it even.
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as you start moving, all those bottles would shatter.
Clinkety-clink, yeah.
But like the whole time he's doing this, it's cutting back. There's like there's movement in the grass, and we see from like the Blob's perspective as it like slithers up into the car,
Evil Dead style.
Yeah.
I love when we get the Blob.
Love
POV
a creature cam. Yeah. So it like slithers up into the car, and like the girlfriend is like totally passed out at this point. And he gets back into the car and sees that she's passed out and is like, ho, 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 it's raping time.
Well...
He does, right?
Yeah, that is what he does.
That is what he does, because he's like, ooh, she's asleep. He's like, oh, you must be hot. Let me undo one of these buttons for you. Ooh. Oh, you're still hot? Let me undo another one of these buttons for you. And it's like the whole time, it's like we know the Blob is in the car. And it's like we know that he's about to get his, frankly, his deserved comeuppance at this point. But what's great is, or at least
he gets hentai.
The first time you see it, you're probably not expecting where the Blob actually comes from. I certainly wasn't. You expect it to be like in the back seat or something. But like as he goes to fondle her breast, his hand like goes into her chest cavity.
You know what it reminds me of is, once again, the thing when they go to
do the defibrillator and the mouth opens up. It is kind of similar. His hand goes into her chest cavity, like her face turns to him, and it just sort of like collapses in on itself, and like tentacles of the Blob like explode out of her face onto him.
And he gets hentai.
Yeah, and he gets hentai. It's fucking awesome.
It's so cool.
It's so cool.
Like, wow, what an amazing film. Yeah. Oh, just joy.
It's like, yeah, so while he was mixing up that drink, the blob, like, got inside of her without, like, burning through her flesh. It was just, like, hanging out in
small
there.
enough at that point.
Yeah.
And it's
Taking
one
its
of
time,
those things where, like, the effect is so cool.
It's so cool.
That, like, I don't completely
Suspended
care
disbelief.
about
I don't give a shit, man.
No,
It's
yeah, fuck
it's such a great moment. We've got a clip right along because we still got to talk about the diner scene and the movie theater scene and
Let's
the
talk about
sewer
the diner.
scene.
Yeah.
The
I
diner
have
comes next.
I have a cool note. This is one of my favorite aspects of how they pay homage and just trim all of the fat. In the original film, they do the freezer scene at the grocery store, and there's that whole sequence, and it runs so long, and there's all these other things that get caught up. Here, they've just cut for as rich as this film is, they just cut the grocery store. No need for it. Waste of time. And they use the walk-in freezer at the diner, which makes perfect sense.
Yep.
So, like, I love that. And they set it up the same way, just with so much more texture. I love when the blob goes under. Whatever. I love when the blob goes under the boards on the door, like, all splinter and go out. It's a really nice touch. It's just constant in the film. Also, if you look closely at the walk-in freezer, they really just took a bunch of, like, cardboard boxes and they just sprayed, like, white paint and foam over them to make them look frozen and cold.
Yeah, make it look like ice.
And it's great. It's really charming, and it works. It gives the scene really good texture.
Well, I love how tongue-in-cheek some of the references in that scene are. Like, as they're running through the diner, Brian knocks over a can. Like in the original, where the girl knocks over a bunch of cans, except this time it's strawberry jam, which obviously is a criticism of the original one.
He says I killed the strawberry jam.
Yeah. Well, and they do that earlier in the movie too. We didn't mention it, but like after the blob initially gets on the homeless guy's hand, we immediately smash cut to a kid eating like red Jello.
Oh, he's like slurping
it off the plate.
And his mom is like,
yeah.
"Don't eat with your face."
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah. There's a lot of faces that get eaten later on.
Well, speaking of faces that get eaten, that's how like the diner scene like really kicks off.
Oh, yeah.
Is, you know, they're closing up for the night, and like the cook is back there, and like the sink is clogged, so he's trying to unclog it, and he reaches down in there and he's digging around.
He becomes the clog,
and he does. I love it because like he's like digging around in the drain. He's like up to his forearm, and you're like expecting the blob to like grab his hand, right? But then it's like, nope, he pulls his hand out and he's kind of like got some slime on his fingers, and he's like, what the fuck is this? And then basically just like
grabs him.
A hand basically made out of goo shoots out of the drain and wraps around his head and pulls him into the sink drain, like completely.
And it's so fast. It just whips him in there. And with such immediate power and strength that his whole head just goes right down that drain.
Well, and
like
then,
enough to just pull like a head through metal, like fast.
Okay.
And it doesn't feel like a Looney Tune. It is like we're watching like something that is almost cartoonish, but it's given such weight, and
it's
Foley
horrifying.
is so good that you believe it. You believe that it's that.
Well,
powerful.
and then
it's a masterclass of editing. Again,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
I think if it was worse edited, it would feel Looney Tunes as hell. Like,
well, and then
it takes so many people, to make it.
And
make
then
it
the
work like
waitress and Meg and Brian like come running into the kitchen, and they just see like his legs and like one of his hands like sticking up out of the drain, and like the hand is still like twitching and moving as it all gets like sucked down into the drain, and like the pipe under it is like
bulk up and bleed.
Yeah.
Ugh, it's so cool.
It's so fucking cool. Yeah. And it's after that point that, you know, they run into the freezer and it tries to chase them, and they first realize that it doesn't like the cold. But then it goes outside to follow the waitress. She just like jumps through the window into the alley and runs into the phone booth, and she's trying to call the cops. And, you know, there's a really nice scene at the beginning in the diner where she's like flirting with the sheriff, and, you know, as he leaves, he realizes that on the check she wrote like, I get off at 11, and he was already like, after what they think was the murder of Paul, because they don't believe Meg's story about a big blob monster, right? He's like, oh yeah, I'm worried about a friend of mine, so I gotta go check on her. And he's like on his way to the diner already. And as she's in the phone booth, she's like trying to call. She can't get anybody on the phone. The blob is on the roof, and it's just like bleeding down, slowly covering more and more of the telephone booth. And she finally gets the police station on the phone. She's like, where's, you know, Sheriff so-and-so? And the lady on the phone is like, I don't know. He said he was going to the diner. And like right at that moment, she looks up, and the sheriff's face just like swims into the shot, like up against like the glass as it's like being dissolved. You could see like the badge and everything next to it. It's like, oh man, that's another case where like
was just, it's so earnestly set up. You really believe that they're going to get away in the end.
It's another rug pull, you know, like it's a trope that, you know, in these dire circumstances in a horror movie, you expect them to get out at the last second. You know, even in the telephone booth, you're like, oh, she's surrounded. How is she going to get out now?
She does not.
She does not.
She absolutely does not. That effect of like the blob like crashing through the door,
and the force and weight of it, because like they use like a dummy for her, and they do it at full force. Like it's pressurized, and it looks like a fucking crash cam.
Yeah.
Like, this is my favorite sequence of the movie. The telephone sequence. Yeah. It's incredible. And once again, like the gut punch impact of having these well-developed characters that you think are going to play a major role in the movie.
Good people,
killed off.
Yeah, you think the sheriff, because in the 50s one, you know, the sheriff or the chief of police or whatever was like, he's around till the end. Like, he's one of like the central characters, and they kind of set him up in the same way as Paul in this one, where like you feel like he's going to be like one of the heroes or whatever, and we don't even see him get grabbed by the blob. We just see his dissolving body, you know, inside it, pressed up against the phone booth right before the waitress, you know, gets got. And yeah, it's bad times, man. Yeah, bad times for all these characters. You can just
assume too that he probably saw it from down the block and ran in to help. You know, just trying to.
Yeah, and it just swamped him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This point is actually kind of a good segue into like how the ideas generally of the two films kind of differ, right? Like the original one, you know, you can read into it as the blob being kind of the red force of communism that's consuming everything. But, you know, the community comes together with the authorities in the community to overcome.
Yeah.
And in this movie, on the other hand, the police are bumbling idiots. They don't really help much.
They are, and also the blob is not, and this is jumping forward a little bit, but worth talking about. In this, the blob is not the invading force of communism. It's the overreach of the U.S. government.
Yeah, I mean, like, at the end of the original Blob, the government comes in and saves the day at the end.
Yeah.
And in this movie, that's completely subverted.
The government are straight up the villains.
Yeah.
You know, they come in their hazmat suits with their helicopters and everything under the pretense of, like, you know, there's a virus, you know, that we think is loose in this town. We got to quarantine everything. And, like, Meg and Brian tell them about, you know, seeing the blob, and they're like, oh, thank you so much for telling us. This is great. This is great news. Or like, this is very good to know. We just have to kill it and everything will be okay. And then later, like, Brian is like eavesdropping on them, and he sees, I love that reveal too, where they're like, the government is like all set up around like the crater where the meteorite is, and they lift it up out of the ground, and you can see that like under all the dirt and stuff that was covering it, it's actually like a metal satellite, and it's got an American flag on it. That's such a great little like moment of revelation that it's not like a meteorite, that it was a satellite. And they talk about how they had like sent microbes into space to basically be bombarded by cosmic radiation because they figured it would produce like some sort of mutating effect, because they're trying to create like bioweapons to use against the Russians, right?
And to keep in mind too, this is 2 years after the Challenger.
Oh yeah,
and frankly, when this was written and made, also I don't know how long this movie's timeline was, but usually an effects film like this takes a good 2 years.
A year,
some cases.
yeah,
a year, 2 years. That timeline adds up pretty well for like crashed satellites and like mistakes and.
I mean, you were still in the cold. It's still in the tail end of the Cold War and the space race and everything. Sure. So, but
I mean, like it generally, like the messaging is very anti-war and anti-military overreach.
Yeah, the U.S. government are the bad guys in this. Explicitly, they're the bad guys.
So I think having such a different message in the film makes it feel like it's way more relevant to contemporary society than the 50s one, well,
I mean, I would say the 50s one was relevant to its contemporary time.
Sure.
But
like this one almost feels countercultural in a sense, because 88 was like the end of the Reagan era.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, I think, Vietnam was like the major turning point for a lot of that cinema. It's like the 50s one is very much a pre-Vietnam movie, and this was very much a post-Vietnam movie. Because like the government, like the spooks, are the fucking bad guys. They're like, we're explicitly trying to, this is a bioweapons experiment, and this entire town is expendable. We have to seal everything off, and we gotta take this creature alive, because with this, like, we can defeat the Russians. That's a movie that I want to see.
Well, the core irony of that is so much of Russia is Arctic tundra.
That's true. They just have to retreat to... Yeah, that was the mistake that Hitler made, right? And Napoleon. That'd be so funny if they just, like, shoot the blob in, like, a missile over to Russia, and it just lands and, like, immediately freezes. Russia's just like, the fuck?
I also love how much they do try to kill it with fire in this movie. There's flamethrowers.
Yeah.
The flamethrower kill is great, too.
Which is it's foolish it's trying to kill it with fire, because it survived the re-entry of the atmosphere. Right. Like, the satellite, or what we think at the time as a meteor, is, like, smoking. Like, it's burning. Yeah. So of course it could survive heat.
Yeah, which is maybe how it mutated, too. Yeah. Which is fun.
But the flamethrower kill you're talking about is so cool.
They've got the hazmat guy, and at this point it's a kaiju. It's going around the town trying to eat people and stuff. And the flamethrower guy comes out and he's hitting it. And all it does is it just sends a tentacle forward that hits the front of the...
Just plugs up.
Plugs it up, and boom, he goes off. And it's great.
That sets the Reverend on fire, who's standing next to him, too. Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about that. Right after the diner scene, like, the Reverend is walking home, and he sees, like, the blob after it has, like, destroyed the phone booth, and he sees it, like, slithering down into the sewer, and he goes into the diner and into the freezer, and he finds like little frozen pieces of it, which becomes relevant later. So like tracking what the Reverend is doing throughout the movie. He's not around a whole lot, but it's important. Yeah.
Well, we should talk about the movie theater.
Yes, this is this whole part leads into arguably the climax of the film, which
where it should be
crazy, because there's so many like great climactic moments in this movie. Yeah, but just like in the 50s one, the blob attacks like a midnight horror, a midnight spook show.
And it's important to mention Meg's little brother, probably like 11, was there with his friend. They snuck in, because
the friend's brother is an usher at the theater. Yeah.
And I love the banter and sequence of them watching the slasher movie, because there's a dude sitting behind them who's like saying what's about to happen to his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And the kid keeps looking back and giving him like a Costanza look. Like...
I do really love, again, another little clever editing thing is how they like first introduce the movie scene, where it's like, you know, after the diner scene and all of this, we cut to like a man and a woman like out in the woods by a fire, and they're like making out, and they're sitting there, and like they look up and they see like a dude like trimming the hedges up by the road, and they're like, it's a little late to be trimming the hedges, isn't it? Maybe he's some kind of peeping Tom. I'm like, ooh, let's give him something to peep at. And, you know, so they start like kissing more and fondling, and then like the guy like looks up and he's got a hockey mask on, and it's like, wait, what the fuck? And then it cuts, and it's like, that's the movie that that the kids are watching in the theater. Like that little just for a minute where you think like, oh, these are the next people who are gonna get swamped by the Blob. It's like, no, that's the movie the kids are watching.
Payoff is great, and the kids, when they're telling the other guy to be quiet in the movie theater, the big brother who's an usher comes over, and he's like, hey guys, you gotta keep it down, even though they're the ones telling the other dude to shut up, which is cute. And he's like, you know, hey, take your feet off the seats, put that out. And so the kid takes his feet down, and the guy leaves, and immediately the kid puts his feet back up. He's like, man, why is your brother so lame? And awesome. Those kids
I love
like, those kids are so rad.
I love that that kid, the friend, while he's watching the movie, he's wearing...
Still got his headphones.
He's wearing his headphones. He's listening to his Walkman or whatever, like, while watching the movie.
Cool.
Too cool.
Yeah, those are, like, the coolest 8-year-olds ever. Like, they're rad.
Well, the projectionist gets killed in this one, just like in the original, but this one is...
I like the subversion with the vent, because it's too hot up there. Oh, also, I love that I think he's reading an old horror comic. I didn't get a close look at him. I think it's like one of those oldies.
Yeah, he's sitting there. He's reading and he's playing with a yo-yo while he's reading the comic or the magazine or whatever. He's playing with the yo-yo. And yeah, he gets on the intercom. It's like, what's wrong with the AC? It's like hot as hell up here. And the guy's like, the AC's running full blast. What are you talking about? He's like, I don't know. Something must be blocking it. And he like looks into the vent, and
it's very alien.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, and we get the blob cam again. It's like coming up the vent, and it, you know, lunges at him, and he screams. And then we cut to the manager or whatever coming in with the flashlight, being like, Bob, where are you at? Or whatever his name is. And he's looking around, and he can't find him. And then the dude's yo-yo comes down beside his head, and he looks up, and the blob is fully covering the ceiling, and the projectionist is like mid-melting in the middle
again,
of
the big distended mouth. And
yeah,
it's just so
and the yo-yo
horrifying.
hanging down from his finger, and you know, then the tentacles come down and grab the manager and pull it up, and then, you know, shortly after that, the blob bursts out through the windows. We get exactly what you were saying that you wanted in the last one, Ben. Exactly.
Yes.
Where, like, the film, like, burns up, and then the screen turns red as the blob, like, blocks the projection as it's coming
filling
out.
the room
and,
with red
you know,
light.
Starting grabbing people. And it was
the
giving
shot
me...
of it coming through the window looks so good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's composited because they did like a miniature with it, and they you know, threw it up on the back wall as the people are running away, so it looks huge.
Yeah.
It's coming in, and
So
the
much-
compositing looks really good in that scene.
So much of, like, especially the latter half of this movie, once the blob gets really big, is, like, done with miniatures. Like, they're just, like, constantly, sometimes within, like, the same, or often, rather, within the same sequence of shots, like, jumping between, like, full-size puppets, miniatures, compositing, like animatronics and stop motion. Like, it's crazy. And it's like, yeah, some of the compositing, like, you know, it's apparent. Like, it's not...
It makes it more fun, I think.
It's not the best, but yeah, it's
sometimes
just
like seeing that edging on compositing, like to me, it just reminds me of my childhood. It's warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, I mean,
it's the fun kind of seeing the strings. And here again, it's really not that bad.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's in such an effects-heavy film, just like seeing the craft, like seeing the strings, like it just, it just feels like it's giving you a little peek behind the camera of like what techniques they're using to you know, pull off these crazy set pieces. 'Cause it's so good, man. And there's so much going on in that scene too, like all the people getting grabbed by the blob and like flailing around the tentacles, and then like Meg comes in and there's like the one woman lying on the floor and Meg like rolls her over and like half of her body is like already dissolved and like pulling up from the floor like gum.
I love how during that sequence the lighting is like strobing the whole time. Also, if you're watching,
hides some of the stop motion.
It does it really well too. Like you know, we talk about shooting things in darkness a lot to hide effects details, but this movie subverts that by doing strobing, and I think it works just as well. Honestly, obviously, if you're epileptic, maybe you know, look away for this sequence, but I think it's incredibly well done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
sewers.
Yes, the sewers. That's the next big bit. We're trucking right along. Meg and the two little boys like go out the back of the theater into the alley, and it's a dead end, and the blob is coming for them. So they dive down. They open up a manhole cover and get down into the sewers, and they're running around in there. And some of the government goons go down there too. At this point, Brian is like still eavesdropping on them, and he hears like the, you know, people on the radio saying like, oh, it followed, you know, the one girl and two kids down into the sewers, and the one, like the main doctor, the main evil scientist is like, good, we can keep it contained in the sewers. So Brian knows. He's like, oh, Meg's down there.
Well, and beyond that, he's like, the civilians down there are disposable.
Yeah, they're expendable.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, I gotta go save Meg. You know, he gets on his bike, and that's when we have like them chasing him with the helicopter, and we get the payoff to him trying and failing to jump the bridge earlier. He has to do it for real this time. Again, setup, payoff. And just that whole that shot, the stunt shot, is spectacular. Him jumping the bridge, one of the army jeeps chasing him like ramps off and like flips into the gorge. You've got the helicopter flying low with the spotlights coming in behind him as he's jumping over the bridge. It's just fucking awesome.
They catch it
man.
from like 3 angles too.
It's just fucking awesome.
It's so cool.
It's so fucking cool.
And again, like, it's so impressive, because like we cover a lot of these sort of monster films where they cut away back to the people on the ground at times, and so often it's insufferable because we're not looking at the fun monster anymore. Why did you take us away from the cool monster? And here, you could give a shit because it's so fucking rad and awesome. Like,
and
like you don't mind stepping away for a second. Like,
and I feel like I know these characters and I'm invested in what happens to them. Mm-hmm. Because then we cut back to them, Meg and the two kids in the sewer. They come into sort of like this like big room. The water's like waist deep, and you know they know the blob is coming behind them, and they start trying to like climb a pipe to like get out through a sewer grate. And as they're doing that, the friend gets grabbed and pulled under the water, and Meg sort of like goes back and is like looking for him, and she can't find him, and then he like comes up out of the water like half melted and is like, man,
probably the scariest of all like the distended faces.
Yeah, it's like,
I mean,
it's
once again, if it's like subverting that classic horror trope of, oh, they're gone underwater for a really long time, how are they going to get out of this?
Yeah,
well, they don't. You know,
right?
Like the kid doesn't, at least,
or that like, you know, he's get pulled under the water and he's never seen again, and we know that he's dead. And instead, they're like, no, we're gonna let you see the half melted 11-year-old before he gets like pulled back underwater.
And it is
this movie. This movie really said, "Fuck them kids."
Fuck them kids.
And again, just like a subversion. It's like you're just like, if usually in horror movies, if kids die, it happens off screen or in a way where you don't see the gruesome details. In this movie, they said, nope, you want to see a half melted kid? Here's a half melted kid. And, then, so Meg starts, like, climbing the pipe after her brother, and, the blob sort of, like, rears up out of the water, and it's got, like, a big mouth, and it's, like, reaching up towards her, and then the government goons come in and distract it long enough for, like, the brother to crawl out, but she has to find another way because she can't fit out through the grate. And then Brian shows up. He has ridden his bike into the sewer, which is fucking sweet and gets great payoff when they run into a dead end. And they turn around and, like, the blob is, like, in the tunnel behind them. But, the walls of this tunnel are like, it's a pipe. It's a big pipe. So he's able to, like, ramp up on the wall around the blob to go past it. It's such a fucking cool effect.
It's fun, too, because, like, when they hit the wall and they have to turn around, he ramps a little bit, Like, he gets a little going. And so you're just starting to think, like, no, they're not going to do it. Are they? Are they gonna have him do like a half pipe stunt?
There's so much great like fucking Evel Knievel bullshit in this movie with the motorcycle, which is like, if you got a character riding a motorcycle, get your fucking use out of it.
It's cool too because like the original film, like it's so steeped in like Americana and guys smoking cigarettes and riding cool cars and convertibles and stuff, and it's all with the fins, like all the 50s Americana stuff, and they lean in so hard with that because, like, man, motor stunts, that's about as American as it gets.
And hey, it's
so cool.
We were talking about like the quote unquote kids in the original, having like big tunnel snake vibes. Well, in this one, Brian literally becomes Kevin Dillon literally becomes a tunnel snake.
He rules.
Tunnel snakes
rule,
baby. Fuck yeah. I was fucking hooting and hollering when he zooms up on the wall past the blob. Yeah.
I love how, so they get past the blob and they're making their escape. They run into a goon who's like kind of wounded and horrified.
He's the last one. The other ones have gotten swamped.
Yeah. And they see that there's a ladder up to the surface, and they start climbing it, and some goons look down from above, and it turns out they're in, like, the city square, and the main evil scientist is there along with the others, and the main scientist tells them to close the grate.
Yep, we have to keep it contained down in the sewers. They're expendable, so leave them down there.
So they put the sewer cover over it, and then they roll up a big truck to park on top of it.
Yeah, they put the wheel on top of the manhole cover so they can't get up off of it. But what they neglected to realize is that the goon who's left down in the sewer has a fucking bazooka. For some reason. So cool. It's great.
So 80s.
Yeah, well, I mean, and he's like too traumatized and terrified to think of what, to do anything.
The perfect actor for it too. This guy looks so gaunt and horrified.
Yeah,
like,
he's just
ravaged by the sights he's seeing.
He's just blubbering, but Brian notices, the bazooka that he's got slung over his shoulder, and so he says, fuck it, and points it up the ladder towards the manhole cover and shoots it, and the truck that's parked on top of it just fucking explodes. And again,
glorious fire.
They got it from like 3 or 4 different angles, and we just cut between each angle as it explodes. Just huge fucking fireball. Yes, baby, it's so fucking good. Then they climb back up and they have a standoff with the government goons and like...
Which is all I ever wanted from the original... Well, not all I ever wanted. One of the many things I wanted.
Yeah, I wanted so much.
From the original Blob movie, where the one cop who doesn't trust Brian, who doesn't trust the main character, doesn't have any payoff, right? Like, he starts to doubt him a little bit in the original film, and then immediately the Blob shows up, so there's no moment for... any tension here. This movie gets it in beautifully. There's a Mexican standoff with the cop. He's pointing his gun gun at Brian, and Brian's pointing his gun at the hazmat guys. The hazmat guys are pointing their gun at Brian, and for a second they kind of switch off a little bit because now the cop is like, well, wait a minute, they shouldn't be killing a kid either, even though I want to kill this kid. And then, like, so he points his gun over at them, and like, it's great. It's chaotic. It's fun.
The Blob still intervenes too.
Of course he
It gets the main evil
But we
side.
get a moment of tension before it does.
Yes.
You know, we get some really nice build-up where it can be revealed to the whole town that the scientists are bad. And Brian exposes them for the villains they are, because the villain is just like, yo, shoot the kid, let's get this over with. And the cop is like, well, wait a minute. And then I was just threatening to shoot
Brian
the kid. You would actually shoot the kid.
Like, this is one night. How are they here so fast?
Yeah, how did they know exactly how did they know to get here? Like, of course, and so it casts some doubt, and then long enough for the Blob to intervene, and a tentacle comes out and grabs the evil scientist around his ankle and like pulls him into the sewer. And it's great because like he has an M16, and the M16 like goes sideways across the manhole, so it like stops him and he's able to grab onto it, so like his upper body is poking up out of the sewer, and then we just see like the Blob like burst up into the helmet of his hazmat suit and just like jerk him down into the sewer. It's
great because he doesn't just like fall, or is like, he's not like loosely pulled down. It looks like he's pulled out of the suit and down, and the
he's being like ripped into the sewer,
and it's so, once again, the weight, the impact of it, and it, essentially in a single shot too. Like it's so effective. Like the Blob is powerful.
Yes, extremely. Well, and then the military guys intervene because the colonel, who is like second in command, he's like, yeah, fuck this, let's kill it. And they like, him and like 4 or 5 other dudes walk over to the manhole and just like unload their guns like down the hole, and then he's like, bring over the satchel charge, short fuse, and like drops it down there, and there's like another big explosion, and they're all like, yes, we did it.
It
Hooray.
feels like the Predator sequence when, they're all shooting the shit out of the jungle.
Yeah.
Just to clear it out.
Yeah, and it's like, yes, we did it. Or hooray, America. Bald eagle flies by in the background. But no, and then he sees like the manhole cover shaking, and like the ground starts shaking, and the Blob just like erupts from the ground in like this big pillar of flesh and goo, very Akira style.
Yeah.
And
really is.
And it comes down onto like the colonel, but I love like right before it lands on him, he's got like grenades like strapped across his chest, and he like pulls all the pins, cool. Like rise. Well, it's cool, but then immediately after that, like we get like a wide shot and we see like little flashes of light sort of like inside the Blob, but then it just like keeps going. It's like the grenades did absolutely nothing. It's immune to explosives. It doesn't fucking give a shit. Like, it doesn't have organs to be damaged. It's just like a big writhing mass of goo and flesh.
Yeah.
And sort of now to wrap things up, they run into like City Hall and they're like trying to barricade it, and Brian remembers
Meg is trying to put out the priest.
Oh yeah, this fire. When the flamethrower thing happens. Yeah, you're right.
He's on fire, so she grabs a fire extinguisher, and she happens to also shoot it at the Blob, which is a great reference to the 50s one. And obviously it dawns on her, and it's emphasized that the Blob doesn't like the cold. Yeah,
and she remembers back to them in the meat locker, and it seems that Brian has also had the same revelation. Because as most of the town like runs into like City Hall or whatever to try to hold out, and the Blob is like trying to get in, Brian comes through with the like snow machine.
Ice truck.
Yeah, the ice truck that was, again, set up earlier in the movie. And he comes crashing through with that and starts like spraying snow at the Blob, and it's got like a big plow on the front of it, and he like rams into it, but then it like flips over the truck, and it's like he's trapped inside. It's sort of like, I feel like that's sort of like the parallel to it, like, engulfing the diner and, like, the 50s one, like, it's all on the outside of his truck and he's trapped inside.
I mean, it also feels like a subversion, in a way, of the telephone box scene.
A little bit, yeah.
Because, in that scene...
It's very similar.
The waitress is surrounded, and, you're thinking, how is she going to get out? And
she doesn't.
She doesn't. And so it brings legitimate tension to the scene.
Yeah.
Where, like...
there's no reason why they wouldn't kill him.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as we believe. They've shown that they'll kill anybody.
Well, when the truck flipped over the big, like, CO2 tanks that have, like... that are, like, the snow creator, the liquid nitrogen, sort of fall off the truck. So, like, Meg sees the blob, like, on top of the truck and, like, about to kill Brian, and she grabs a gun and runs and jumps up on top of the tanks and starts shooting at it to, like, draw its attention. And as it starts coming for her, she sets a satchel charge, like, down in the tanks. I love, she, like, goes to jump off heroically, and, like, her foot gets caught on, like, the hose, and she just kind of, like, smacks the other side of the tank.
It's a great stunt.
It is, yeah. It probably hurt.
Yeah, like, it reads with a lot of impact.
And yeah, she's, like, dangling there, she's trying to get out, but it's given Brian enough time to get out of the truck, and he comes and he pulls her off, and, they're able to get away as the blob engulfs the tank, and the satchel charge goes off, blowing up the liquid nitrogen, and freezing the blob and shattering it into a bajillion pieces of delicious-looking rock crystals. Tasty crystals, delicious-looking rock candy. And, the whole town comes out, and there's, like, fake snow, or, rather manufactured snow raining down. And, like, the mechanic from the beginning, he comes up to Brian, he's like, see, I told you we'd have snow. And he looks at, like, the wreckage of the truck. He's like, I wonder if I'm covered for that shit.
The whole town comes out, and it's snowing, and everything's nice. And it's, like, it's kind of funny, too, because, like, the other kid comes out, and he's like, oh, look, it's snowing. It's like, man, that kid would be fucking shitting and crying and just so sad.
Pissing, yeah.
Like his friend got, like, melted in front of him. Like, he's, like... But it's the end of the movie. We gotta keep spirits up. The town is saved.
Yeah, the town is saved. The evil.
What if, like, the credits had slowly rolled over the town lamentably wailing?
We need more movies that end like that. So Brian and Meg embrace and hold each other, like, in the snow, but we do have a little epilogue where we cut to the Reverend.
A tent.
He's started, like, a tent revival style, traveling tent revival style church, and he is, he's, like, partially burned.
He's got glasses he has, like, the one black glasses lens, to hide his
covering his blind eye. Yeah. And he's got, like, long raggedy hair, and he's preaching the end of the world, fire and brimstone, wormwood falling from the sky and consuming saint and sinner alike, blah blah, all of this shit. And then we see him, like, after the sermon, sort of, like, in his section of the tent, and he's, like, looking at how fucked up he is, and, like, a woman comes in, she's like, Reverend, when is the day of judgment coming? And he's like, very soon. God will give me a sign, and he holds up a jar that has a little blob in it, because we saw him putting the crystals that he found in the freezer into that jar earlier, and we see that he's got another blob ready to unleash upon the world when he deems that the time is right, when God gives him a sign. I think it'd say a much more satisfying end than the original, where they just drop it off of a plane into, like, the Arctic, or, like, the end. This one really feels more like the end. And then we get the credits with not a Blob-centric song, but, it does feel like in the same tradition of the Dream Warriors song at the end of Nightmare 3.
Nowhere near as good.
It's not as good because it's...
Oh man, I think like technically it's a dope song. It's really
they got Alien instead of Dokken.
Yeah, but I gotta say though, like Dancing in the Shadows. Delicious,
yeah, I mean it's
corny 80s like rock.
It's great. Like
shit.
It would have been better if they had gotten a Dream Warriors style original song about the Blob.
I do love though.
That being said,
the pink
still
credits.
good.
This is the only thing I think the 50s movie does better. The 50s Blob song is better than...
Yeah, imagine if you'd been like,
it's true.
I'm waiting for God to send me a sign before I wreak havoc across the world.
Beware of the Blob. He creeps and leaps and glides and slides across the floor and through the door and all along the walls. A blotch, a splotch. Be careful of the Blob. Boom, boom, boom.
The world will be annihilated.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
I think it's time to rate this.
It's time. We did it.
I think this is
If
probably...
this isn't a golden pod, I riot.
Please.
It's a formality. Five.
Five.
Yeah, like it is. It is easily one of the greatest monster movies of all time.
Easily.
One of the best horror films of the 80s.
I need to sit on it for a little bit, but it might be a new top 10 for me, like of all time.
It's
really good.
You wouldn't be
really
wrong.
Good.
It's a banger, and getting to watch this and talk about it made watching the other one last week worth it.
Oh, yeah, so worth it. Absolutely. Just to see how they did it right. It's a really good study, I think.
Yeah.
In that. Like I would recommend doing them back to back.
I mean, geez, if you're gonna watch the 50s one at all, absolutely do yourself the favor of watching this one afterwards.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Well, yeah, that's a unanimous 5 out of 5. The Blob is a golden pod.
Happy anniversary, boys.
Happy anniversary. Happy podiversary. Happy birthday. Next week it's October. We are fully in spooky season, and we are
seeing the return of Shawnee Smith.
Yes, we're doing incredibly have a back-to-back Shawnee Smith movies because it's time for Saw 10.
What happenstance?
Yeah, what happenstance?
Well, this is her first Saw movie since 6, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I was looking at her IMDb right before we recorded.
So she really avoided like most of the really bad ones. So we'll see. After
Tony Bell as well, for that matter.
After Jigsaw and Spiral, my expectations are really, really low for this. That being said, the trailers do sort of look like it's more of a return to form. What we expect from Saw, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good, but it might at least make me nostalgic, which will be something.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to it. I want to see some dumbass Rube Goldberg ass machines.
It's also, I have heard, the longest of the Saw movies.
Boy. It's
over 2 hours.
Oh,
wait, what?
No.
That's not
why?
What would make...
I guess they got a lot to say.
Well, it's a Saw movie, man. Like, tight 90. Come on. All right, we'll see.
I guess they got a lot to say, yeah.
I hope it is. I do.
Yeah. So join us again next week to hear our thoughts on Saw 10. I can't believe they keep making them.
They just keep on coming.
Yeah.
All right. It is time for a sponsor. The Shelf. It glows and even dribbles a little bit.
Throbs.
And God. Yeah, I was going to leave that part out, but it really is throbbing, huh?
Beware of the Shelf.
Beware of the Shelf. Speaking of horrifying forces beyond our understanding, this week was brought to you and to us by a grimoire of unspeakable knowledge and unfathomable secrets. Ponder the words closely. Observe the depths of the mind. Travel to strange places beyond the stars. In the realm of dreams, in the book of, what was it again? A grimoire of unspeakable knowledge and unfathomable secrets.
The secrets cannot even be fathomed.
That's right.
In fact, they're so unfathomable that I can't even say the words. That's how you know. I don't always use the products that are advertised on the show, but this one I can vouch for because I can't say unfathomable.
You haven't slept since you read it.
I haven't.
True
because
testament
the secrets and the knowledge. You won't even sleep. All right. That'll do it for us this week. If you like the show and you want to give us a 6-year podiversary present, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this. You can also become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/podpeoplepod.
Gotta admit, 6 years?
6 years.
5 years without missing a week?
Yeah, I think we have been fully 5 years at this point without missing a week.
Hell yeah, boys!
Consistent.
That's
yeah.
what's up.
That's what's fucking up.
How can you not, right?
And yeah, so if you want to show your appreciation, maybe consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. You can get into the Discord and hang out and talk with us, and I do monthly streams of video games and stuff. It's fun.
Yeah.
Shout out to our honorary pod boys, Sam, Zach, Micah, and Mitchell. Y'all are the realest.
So real.
You can also follow us at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings, links to those reviews. You can see our full list of golden pods there. Got some absolute heaters on there, and the Blob has joined them this week. Outside of that, my recommendation, I'm recommending an album, the new Grave Pilgrim record, The Bigotry of Purpose. I've been listening to that shit on repeat. If you like your black metal really raw, but also really melodic and catchy, check it out. It's fire. It's one of my favorite records of the year, for sure.
Well, I'm going to recommend a new movie that I watched yesterday. It's Blackberry. Starring Glenn Howerton and Jay Baruchel, directed by Matt Johnson, who directed and starred in Nirvana, the band, the show.
Which you recommended last week. It's a great sort of corporate bio thriller comedy blend thing. It looked interesting.
It's really great. It's a blast. The story is really compelling and interesting. There's a lot of great humor in it. Glenn Howerton, in particular, gives a really incredible performance.
I heard he goes sicko mode.
Yeah, he's sort of like a cutthroat CEO type, shrewd capitalist, I guess you could say.
A shark.
Yes. It's great. I would definitely recommend it. Tons of fun.
I think, last week I was trying to figure out if the showcase would be out by then or not. It's the 21st is when the showcase
of October?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That hasn't happened then yet.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, yeah, then go check out the Indie Horror Showcase. It's also brought in by The Mix on Steam, so it'll be broadcasting there, as well as Twitch and all sorts of other places. But yeah, go check it out. Go follow DreadXP and Horror Visuals to find out more. Tune in, because we're gonna have a lot of really cool announcements, and there's just a ton of incredible indie titles that have brought trailers to us that we're gonna show off there. I'm really excited. It's just a cool little thing for the industry,
And that's the 21st of October.
I'm not 100% on that, but it's around then.
Okay.
I'm so busy making assets for it and stuff. It's
tentatively in a week or two from the date of release. Yeah,
keep a weather.
And hey, if it has already happened, go check out all the cool trailers from it. Worst case scenario, it's fucking rad.
All right, well, folks, we thank you for listening, especially those of you who have been with us for 6 years. If that's anybody, even if you've only been with us for a year, we thank you.
So many trends and fashions and bits of pop culture and politics and even a whole fucking pandemic have happened since we started this fucking thing.
It's movies, baby.
That's movies.
That's movies.
Cinema.
That's cinema. We thank you for 6 years, and here's to another year, boys.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you next week. Goodbye.